Hello, hello. Welcome to the Baba Center and this month's Artist Talk. Hello. Yes, big round of applause. Yes. We are going to be, our next Artist Talk is going to be December 2nd. But today we have these lovely artists on the podium stage, as you can see, extremely professional. We're going to go around, say our names, our pronouns, and the most important question of today: what is your favorite color?
Oh.
Start us off.
My name is Michael Maxwell. He, and my favorite color is blue.
Hello, I'm Jazz Johnson. My pronoun is she, and my favorite color is canary yellow.
My name is Deanna Bright. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my favorite color is green.
Excellent. Just realizing I didn't say my name. I probably should have done that. Yeah, should have done that. My name is Shalise Meikle. I'm a painter. She, her, and favorite color is purple because it's awesome. With us today is predominantly photographers. I know as artists, we can all dabble in different genres here and there from time to time. What genre do you normally fall into? What's your go-to? And then what do you do on the side?
When you say, what do you do on the side, what do you mean?
So when paint's drying, I'll mess with a wire sculpture. Or I fantasize that I'm a photographer as well. I am not. I hold it and then I push buttons. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, just like a play.
Yeah. My go-to is portraiture, whether it's street portrait or in the studio or on location. And I dabble. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a musician, but I do have a guitar. I used to play in a funk band in the 70s, and so I still pick my guitar up and play some Commodores, some Earth, Wind and Fire, some mandrills, some, see if I can play some, new stuff that's coming out, but never ever do I do it like a big thing. It's just a fun stuff to do, so.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I do mainly fine art and conceptual photography. And outside of that, I do a whole lot of things. I'm a musician. I do vocal jazz and instrumental jazz. Vibraphone mostly. Anybody know vibraphone?
Nice.
Yeah, 4 mallets, but flip my hair, outside of that, I do digital design, illustration, spoken word, and a little bit of installation art as well.
I specialize in portraiture. I'm starting to do more fine art portraiture as well. And on the side, my inner child enjoys painting. I'm not good at it, I am, but I enjoy it. And I like to read and watch anime.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, solid art forms,
Yes.
art, reading and anime, absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's so important to feed your inner child. Too often they get left in the corner. It's like, I gotta go be professional. It's like, no, come play it.
Come play.
Exactly. Jazz. In particular, when you say installation, what do you mean when you say installation?
So a lot of my work with my hands is featured in my photography. So most of the photos that I take, most of the photo shoots that I am doing, I'm building almost everything that's a part of it. So I'm building a set, I'm doing the headpieces. If I have a model that has a headpiece, I'm kind of dabbling with, making some type of jewelry or clothes. Anything that I could, keep up or tear down or whatever, I'm creating, this whole scene to where we can be shooting in your dining room and nobody would ever know because it just looks completely different. So that's mainly my installation work right now, is tied to my photography.
That's awesome. I don't know if there's any way we could do our best. There's an artist, like a PDF I want to send you, specifically about installations. It's amazing, highly recommend.
Yeah.
And then Deanna, I'm pretty sure you can have a little bit of spin off of what Jazz just said as far as like setting up the room and the stuff, all the things.
All the things.
I enjoy being able to control every part of the process, ideating and conceptualizing, and then bringing that out into how I see it, and bringing in the different props and elements, and just setting a scene for myself, both in ways to process the time and space that I'm in that moment, and also an expression of expressing that and sharing that with others. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
No, because that is exactly what art is. It's that moment of just like, hey, this is what I've got going on in my brain. Do you see this? Do you see it? Do you see it?
Yeah. Do you feel it?
Do you feel it? Yeah, and then Michael, with your street photography and also portraiture, like I'm sure there's, when you go to set up, you have that like controlled environment, okay, this goes here, 90-degree angle, something like over here, but then you get to go and play out in the, if you will, out in the streets. Would you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's less control when I'm in the street. Of course, when I'm in the studio, it's lights, camera, action. You got to know what you're doing and setting up lights and f-stops and how much light and those kinds of things. But when I'm out on the street, it's more of a natural progression of things. And so the only plan that I start out with in the street is meeting someone, meeting a stranger. That's the goal, to meet a stranger, and then hopefully in that process I'll get to capture their likeness. But in meeting them, I do want that momentary interaction to be somewhat meaningful. And so it literally, I'm letting the universe dictate that, the vibration dictate that. I'm not just going and going, hey, come here, let me take your picture. There's a vibe, there's a feeling that I have to get, a person has to be giving something off for me to approach them. And then I'll gently approach. Rarely do I take someone's pictures that's not aware, So I do want permission in some sort of fashion. And oftentimes it's an understanding through a vibration. It's like we're looking at each other and they know, and they'll give me the signal that it's okay to capture their photograph. Sometimes it's more intentional. If I'm drawn to them and we start talking, then that's more intentional. But a lot of times it's very organic of how that happens.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, that's so huge that even through such a regimented, controlled process, you can still get those moments of like the universe, where just that one tiny aspect, definitely not tiny,
Right, I know what you mean. Yeah.
but that hidden gem, if you will.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely.
Hell yeah. Nice. With this talk of your process and being in a controlled environment versus a loose environment, are there any artworks that you all submitted for the PowerPoints behind us? And are there any plugins for shows either coming up or, hey, this particular artwork was highlighted at X show? Like you would have seen this out in public. Does that make sense?
This piece, well, I have one up. So, yeah. So that particular piece right there won first in show at the Mint Hill art thing they had in 2013. And I had just gotten back from Zimbabwe. And this was the chief of Chinraro village. And he sat for me, this was with film. And when I got back, somebody said, you should submit that and Mint Hill Arts. Are you familiar with the Mint Hill Arts?
MFSO grant program? Grant something?
I really can't remember, so I really apologize for that. However, I submitted it, and along with a couple of other pieces, and I was really surprised. I'm like, oh my God, I mean, this thing won, and I was just really blown away by it. But I do think, personally, that it's an amazing portrait capture of this guy. He's very, very young, and he ran the whole, thing. And the interesting story around that, we rode up to Chingaro Village, and it took us a couple of hours in this rural back country in Zimbabwe. It was really scary. It was a rickety van, and there were creeks and holes that we were going over, and we got there, and I just hopped out of the van with my camera and just started clicking. And the person that was with us stopped me and says, look, you can't do that. You have not got permission yet to take their pictures, And so I had to kind of regroup, get myself together, and then get permission from him, and then began taking pictures. And then at the end, he allowed me to capture his picture. So it was pretty crazy.
It's so hard when you're excited to create. It's like, oh, right, boundaries, sorry.
I thought I was working for National Geographic magazine, and obviously that's not how they get it done. So,
But yeah, Jazz, during the Like It's Bernie shows coming up, were any of the images, I'm assuming that's like a title to something, or?
It's not.
Oh, nice.
No, a lot of my work, I've only submitted my work like once, ever.
Fix that.
Yeah, we can get into that. But yeah, like a lot of my work is just kind of like this one, just out, and I see this girl and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's amazing, she's gorgeous. She's like, oh hey, she's like talking to my kids, and then she's like, I'm a model and this and that. I'm like, you mind if I take your picture? And so that's kind of how a lot of my photography started. Kind of in a similar way, like just having conversations with people, just being myself and having conversations with folks, and you get work like that you still don't submit anywhere. But yeah, I think what else do I have? I don't remember what else I submitted.
There's a mailing in the grass, this one, and then this photo. I know we're not friends yet, but I really think you should submit that to the art pop.
Agreed.
Okay,
That's really
yeah.
unanimous.
Thank you. So that was actually done in my living room, and the headpiece I did myself. And she was a friend of a friend that I found on Instagram. It was another one of those situations, and the great thing I love about this, that whole experience, we were just having a conversation the whole way through, and I'm just snapping through her talking, which is, I guess that's my approach. I used to be afraid to like ask people to model or like pose, because then I'm like, if I ask them something weird, they're like, oh, she's kind of weird, I was always afraid of that, especially people that model. I'm like, I'm afraid to ask them, well, can you do this and do that? And it's just not proper or whatever. And so the way I started photography, just in general, outside of doing landscape, when I started shooting portraits, it just started with conversations with people. People would just come to my house, more artists that don't like to be photographed. We would just sit and have conversations, and I would just be shooting through. And the beautiful thing about it was that, I would have them say, oh, I've never seen myself like that. And so that's kind of what started this whole obsession with portraiture and kind of creating these comfortable moments, just like this one that's up right now. That was in his backyard.
Nice.
And on the left side of us, it's just like goats and cows and stuff. Just like, but like this is behind his house, and we're just having a conversation. And I'm like, just get comfortable. And he just lays down. And we're talking about just random stuff, like not even art related, not professional at all. This was my second shoot that I did with him. But just to know that I can get work that way, and that came out of my camera. I didn't touch it. I don't edit much.
It looks like an editorial piece.
I say that to myself too. I'm like, oh, this kind of looks like it came out of a magazine. I say that to myself. But yeah, like if that's a part of my process, just keeping the integrity of the moment, and letting that be a moment that we share together. that you know you won't get anywhere else. You know, that's something that I really love about my work.
Thank you so much for that, Jazz.
Yeah, then Viana, I know you had the last time I've seen your work as just you was at the Flux Gallery.
Yeah.
And that was either yesterday or 3 years ago. Would you remind me who that was?
That was my first solo exhibition, and that lasted from May to June. Yes. This piece, I didn't mention it, but I'm a self-portrait artist. This piece is actually currently up at the Light Factory right around the corner. And today's kind of the last day to view it, so you'll be able to see it. But I love what y'all have been talking about, because in my work, I value connection, and just in general, I think I value connection. And when I started photography, one of my favorite parts about it was when I would get with subjects or collaborators, and we would create for hours. We would just stand out there, we would talk, we would generate all these ideas, and we would think big, like beyond anything I would ever think about. And in my self-portraiture, Michael was talking about that kind of energy exchange that happens when you're out doing street photography. I feel that in my self-portraiture with everything around me. I feel like I'm garnering that energy, and it's all just kind of gravitating towards me, and then I'm shining it out when I shoot and when I share. So for me, the older I get, the more I value how connecting with myself allows me to connect better with others. And self-portraiture allows me that. When I started my self-portraiture in 2020, the pandemic hit, and for the first time in a long time, I felt very isolated. I felt like we couldn't see anyone, we couldn't go outside, it was quarantine. I packed my stuff up and I moved home. I'm like, Mom! I need like social time, I need to be around people. And I dived into self-portraiture. And when I was around my mom, when you get around your family, the family stuff comes up. Like, we've all got that. It's just like slight dysfunction. There's a little charge of tension. And at the time, I wanted to process everything that I was feeling, everything that I was learning about my family and myself, and that led me inward. And my camera helped me process all of that and feel it, get through that moment, and then I started sharing, and people also started sharing. And I continue to do that. I continue to look inward and really connect with who I am at this time. And that allows me to connect with others in where they are right now and allow them that space for authenticity. It's fun to be weird, and I just allow myself to be weird around people, because then they realize they're a little weird too. So yes.
So, before we started rolling, Deanna really should either trademark or copyright your several of your sounds.
Yes.
Earlier. That is something I individually love about you. Is like you are very authentic. It's like, oh my god, like this, I could easily be authentic around and with you. Yeah, like there's no hesitation. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go off script a little bit if y'all don't mind.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes.
As far as authenticity, do you all ever experience, because there's a camera between you guys, because there's like a piece of machinery, like does that ever interfere when you're working with a model or a figure, or even in self-portraiture? Like,
It doesn't, I don't think it doesn't interfere.
it's your tool.
It doesn't interfere, but I still have to be conscious of it. Sometimes, especially in the street, there are times that I can't use it, and I have to be aware of that with people. And an example of that was a woman who appeared to be unhoused, was on the street. It was dusk, and she loved photography. And before I took a picture, we struck up a conversation. And she obviously knew something about it, had experienced it sometime in her life. And we were talking. She even looked at the pictures on the back of my camera that I had shot earlier that day. This was really a beautiful time with this person. And when it came to the time to take the picture, I kind of hesitated whether I should take her picture or not. And so I did ask her. And first she said no. She says, no, I prefer you not to take my picture. So the camera just was not important at that moment. It was important that it created conversation, but as a tool to take pictures, it wasn't important. And then as I was walking away, she called me back. She said, you know what, I'll let you take my picture. She said, but only from a distance, right? And so we were right, you know where Mimosas is, uptown on Tryon Street? There's that long thing you can sit on, it's marble-like, you know. So she was sitting on one and I walked over to the other end. And so I used those little silver notches in that little thing to draw you into her, but you couldn't see her features. But it's like one of my favorite pictures that I had, just because of that experience and how the camera really became secondary as opposed to that connection. But yeah, I hope that answered your question. That gave an example of what you were talking about.
Absolutely. As you're talking, I'm getting chills. That's a wonderful story. Yeah, I never, because it is your tool, like a brush would be my tool, there is a moment of creating where it's not primary. It's not your first thought, it is secondary. It's like, oh right, like this is just how I use my hands. Yeah.
I'm gonna share one other quick thing real quick, because you know, sometimes you think of something that's even better, a better example. But, so we were in the park, I had my camera, and it was a woman, I can't remember exactly what she was doing, but I had my camera. And this was many, many years ago, and she seemed interesting, and I felt like this would be great. And so I approached her, I said, may I take your picture, right? And she says, no, I prefer you not, because I liked what I saw around her and all that. She says, no, just please hold this in your heart instead of taking this picture. It was powerful to me, right? And I never did get the picture. But what happened right after that, she began to tell me what was going on in her life, and she was in major distress. And to the point where she says, you seem like a really good person. Would you pray for me? With me. And I literally put the camera down, and it literally became a completely insignificant to that moment. You know what I'm saying? And so that was definitely one of those situations where it's not about that. And I get those kinds of experiences, you know, more often than not when I'm meeting strangers. You know, the camera's definitely a tool to do that, but sometimes the end result when I get home, it's not the pictures that I'm sitting in, remembering and relishing. It's all of those little experiences that I had that day. You know what I mean? Meeting those people. You know, so yeah.
You sound like a treasure hunter.
Yeah. Sandra Shaw.
So I've had similar experiences, and a lot of them were kind of why I started calling myself a photographer. When I started out on film, and I was doing it for a class because I was just like, yeah, do something for fun. I went to like a super prestigious school, I guess, and so photography was like kind of my distraction. But then when I bought my first camera, and literally, so all the photos that I have of there were bought with were taken with the like $300 camera. And that was the first my first digital camera that I ever purchased. And so I would take it everywhere and just hang out with my art friends. I have a lot of friends that are muralists in Nashville. And so we would just go walk in, and I would have my camera, and I'm taking pictures of everything else, and we would go out to eat and end up at my house in my living room and just have conversations. And I remember this one particular time, I had just bought this like upholstered chair. And so I asked my friend to sit in it and, you know, like, can I take pictures of you? And so I'm taking pictures of him, and we get into this conversation to where he begins to cry. And at that moment, it's like, okay, do I shoot this? Do I not? You know, what kind of permission do I have here? And I think permission, like you were speaking to, is a big part of what we do. Not just asking permission from this other person. Consent, not only from this other person, but from yourself. You know, am I giving myself permission to be in this moment? Am I giving myself permission to be grounded and to be present? And to be more than just a person with this camera that's just trying to capture a moment or trying to have something to remember from now? Can I keep this in my heart? You know, like, can I sit here and be with this person and connect with this person and connect with myself and be vulnerable in that way? You know, that's something that I always remember. You know, just that moment of him crying and then him saying, without me asking, you can keep shooting. And I've never showed those pictures to anybody. Not even him, he hasn't seen them. They're gone now, but, because my hard drive, you know, was taken. But that moment taught me a lot about myself and a lot about presence and a lot about connection, like you were talking about, just being in a moment, taking up all this energy that's around you and deciding what to do with it. You know, do I capture it? Do I make it about my camera? Do I make it about a piece that I'm trying to do or a project, or do I just allow this to be what it is?
I feel like both of y'all explained it so well. I feel like sometimes my camera is an extension of myself to the point where it's like a third hand, like I don't even think about it. And when I'm doing my self-portrait art, I set up my camera, my tripod, put on my interval timer, and then I don't think about it anymore. I'm like, that's shooting, and now I can either focus on being a model, and then there have been times where I feel like I've even ascended outside of that and became like an observer to the full experience. But I feel like all of this is, when I look at my work and I see it, I think of it almost as like a form of documentation, because it takes me back to those moments, not just in my self-portrait art, but also when I'm shooting people. I can remember how the room smelled, what we talked about, you know, I've got like 25 different versions of laughs, but like which laugh I was laughing that day, you know, what tears we cried, how we bonded. And I see, you know, when I exhibit my work or when I see people out in the city, I think of those times. I think of that time that we shared. I remember meeting Michael for the first time, and we had already been following each other on social media. And when I walked into his studio, he was like, huh? He was like, we started doing little introductions. I was like, I'm Deanna. He was like, you're Deanna, right?
This is what I did.
Yes, that's it. But we met and we talked for, I feel like, a good 2 hours. And just that exchange, I'm like, every time I see Michael, I think of that. And just my camera, it's just another part of me. And I feel like it ties all of these moments and all these moments that we get to have with one another together. And when we see these photos, when we're all growing older, and you know, we might not have these spaces anymore, we get to look at those photos and think of those times and connect all those memories together. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like growing up with photography, not as a photographer, but I've always seen photographs as just these hidden history gems of just like frozen time. Yeah, because it is that one, especially with grandparents or people that are no longer with us. Like you look at the environment, and you look at the environment, and you're like, oh man, like what house was that? I was like, oh, that was this house. That was back in this year. Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes we take it for granted in the moment. But even when I'm at FAPA, I'm like taking pictures of even just the small, like the chair is set up over there right now, or like just this moment, because it's like one day we might not have this, and we'll get to look back and be like, wow.
Yeah.
When I go to my grandma's house, I try to take pictures of everything, because she has like all these knickknacks, and there's a story for everything. This was when I was in New York, and you know, I got this off the street, and I met this homeless man, and had this conversation, and he gave this to me. She collected everything, and I'm like, that's our history, and those are things that we can continue to capture so that it lives on.
No, doing these art talks, one of the hardest parts is just like, not even just like continuing the conversation, but I don't want to interrupt because like the energy is, it's amazing. I am too curious now. Oh, where did y'all, like, what's your original home? Like, I'm originally from Orlando, Florida. Yeah. Like, did y'all grow up in Charlotte? Where'd you go to school? Is gonna be the next kind of segue question. And then, do you have like a regular job, or do you get the pleasure of being a full-time artist?
So I say that I'm from Charlotte. I went to high school here, went to a junior high school here, graduated, went to Johnson C. Smith, but I'm a military brat, quintessential military brat. And so I was born in Missouri, 8 brothers and sisters.
8 brothers and sisters?
I do, 5 boys, and there's 4 girls because my parents adopted 1, so it was, 9 of us.
Wow.
And, but we were all born in different places. And so my father was career military, so he was in World War II, Vietnam, and Korea. And he was an amazing photographer. And so when we were home, wherever we were, for entertainment, we would look at slides. And the slides were from every place that he's ever been deployed. Vietnam, Europe, these places. And out of all the children, I was the one that was most fascinated by that. It was boring to my siblings. They were like, we gotta look at these darn slides again, and Ernie, my little brother, would have to work the slide, and I would be glued to that screen, like, this is amazing. Seeing, people in rice paddies, rickshaws on the streets of Vietnam, cafes in Spain or, in Italy, whatever. And I was just blown away by this, that they were vivid, because these were slide films, and that's what happened to me. That's how I got this bug, right? So, but anyway, we settled in Charlotte. So I went to Coolwood, Ranson, West Charlotte, graduated and went to Smith. But I do work also, so I'm not a full-time artist. The last 2 years since being at the VAPA, photography in all of its forms for me has really exploded. This place has really opened up doors for me. Like, I'm like, whoa, and people say to me all the time, why don't you do this full time? And I'm like, I'm not sure I want to depend on that to eat. And it gotta be overwhelming, you know what I'm saying? And cause I work every day. I work for the county, actually. And I do domestic violence work. I've been a social worker since getting out of college. And so the human experience is very, very weaved into my work. How even if you hired me to do your portraits and you came into my studio, this thing that I do with people is very, very a part of what I do. I care about people. I'm a nurturer. And our sessions become way more than just me trying to get you in there, take your picture, and get you out, And so, so I think I have like 2 more years before I retire. Hope maybe 1.5, but no more than 2. And then, I'll be able to do photography and the work that I do. It will continue to be a passion. It won't be, it's not that thing that I have to do in order to sustain life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I look forward to when you retire and get to photograph more.
Me too.
So I am originally from Atlanta. Eat the Outcast socks. You know, Outkast is the greatest. So yeah, I'm from Atlanta. I went to school in Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Vanderbilt University. And I studied human and organizational development. What? Not photography. And I was also an undeclared music major. The only reason they did not allow me to declare a major was because they didn't have jazz studies at the time. That's all I wanted to do. Also did creative writing on the side, but ended up still being an artist. I am a full-time artist. I want to say by choice, but I feel like the universe kind of doesn't like me having a job. Because sometimes you just, you know, I feel like sometimes you are so divinely protected from things that aren't for you that it just won't work, and it never works. Me trying to get a 9-to-5 just never works, unless y'all are hiring me. Because I do have children and they gotta eat. But yeah, outside of that, I am a full-time artist. I've been doing that since 2019, kind of out of necessity. Art was the way that I chose to sustain myself, because that was all I had at the time. So, yeah.
I'm originally from Pittsboro, North Carolina, from very deep in the woods. So Charlotte still to this day feels like a very big city to me. I attended UNC Charlotte, and I studied sociology. And then I networked my way into a data analyst position, so I was in corporate up until last year. And at that time, February of 2022, I quit my job to become a full-time photographer. And it's been a roller coaster!
Say that again.
It's been a roller coaster, okay? Very sunshine and rainbows at first. I had about 15K saved up. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing it.
And then it was
You learn so much about yourself. You learn so much about yourself when you are managing your time, how you make money, rent, paying your bills, and I was forced to really look inward, learn that I need to manage money. It's been a roller coaster. So since yesterday, I am re-embodying full-time artist. Earlier this year, so I'm because of how I grew up in nature, in the woods. I love artificial lighting. I love being outdoors in nature. So summer, spring, that's when I like thrive. That's when I get a lot of my clientele. That's when I get a lot of my business. But the winter months hit last year, and studio lighting, being indoors, doing like Christmas mini sessions, not my jam, really. And I decided I didn't want.
Sounds awful.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like when it gets close to the holidays, you kind of got to convince people to spend their money because they already, they're buying Christmas gifts for family and the kids, and so you got to be like, you got to do that extra promotion. And I was like, I've got my time. I don't want to do that. And the rent was still hitting. And so coming up to this year, I went through, possibly being evicted a couple of times, having to go to court, putting on my adult big girl pants, and realizing that I could not just ignore certain things, and because I had to sustain my lifestyle. And I was living uptown at the time, which was something I didn't think about. I thought I planned for everything when I went full time. I was like, I got the money saved, I've got a network, I'm in the community, blah, 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 blah. That I was paying $1,600 in rent. And once the savings and everything ran out and I wasn't promoting, they were still knocking on the door for rent. So I panicked a bit. and I went back into corporate.
Yeah.
This past summer, I went back into a corporate space, and it wasn't for me. Exactly what you said. It feels like, for me, it's God, God in the universe. I was in that space, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. It was taking me time away from creating. It was giving me anxiety because I was rushing everywhere. When I did have time for myself, I didn't want to do any creating. I didn't want to do any art. I didn't want to do any connecting. I wasn't present in the spaces where I had community. And I hated it. I hated it. And so I've been back and forth with that this year. I actually ended a contract position that I had this past week, and that was very fulfilling. But in the last 2 days, I've been driving from Mint Hill, like, oh, my time, my connection. I've been at VAPA more in the last 2 days than I have in the last 2 weeks. And for me, this has become a lifestyle. This has become my life. And that's not to say that I won't continue to, pursue the best option for me to sustain my living, but the artist way currently feels like the only way. This is the way. Yeah. It just feels like that.
Yeah, no, even when you have the financial comfort of a regular 9-to-5 job or just 9-to-5 in general, like what other hardships have y'all come across recently? Has there been any like, oh, insert profanity moments? Like, yeah.
Can I go first?
Get it.
Okay, so real quick rundown of my journey, because I was also in corporate, hated it. I was working overtime and was still barely making my bills at one point in time. And then the government shut down back in 2019, and so everything just like went awry. And my children and I lost our home. And the same week that we lost our home on some stuff that wasn't even real, my aunt died, and we also lost like a really tight connection that we had with somebody in the span of like 3 days. And they gave us less than 2 days to get out of our apartment, and it wasn't even a real thing. And so to uproot my kids, at that time I just had my twins, and they were like 3 or 4 years old. For them to go to school that day, everything was fine, they come home and we're leaving. It was a whole thing. And ended up not even being able to go back to my job because I gotta go to a funeral, went to court, whole nine, went to this funeral, talked to my family about it, and they're like, oh, you on your own. And so to go from that to hustling, making $200 a pop to do a photography shoot, let me do a portrait shoot, let me do this, let me do that, just to be able to eat. It's a lot, I would have days where I didn't eat, but my kids had French fries for dinner. And that's a part of the process that like people don't really talk about. When you choose to, when you choose to like, choose yourself, when you choose to go this different route, no matter all the crappy advice that you got that might sound good, but it doesn't feel right. To also be put into these situations where you have to make this decision of, do I eat, do I hustle, or do I go to, settle for a job that runs me down to where I almost crashed my car because I'm so tired. You gotta make some type of a choice. And I went through that. My kids and I, we slept in our car, we hotel hopped if I could get an extra shoot that night or whatever. Finally ended up in this place of staying in a building with nothing but artists. And that changed my whole trajectory. Actually, the photo that y'all said that y'all liked with the headpiece, that was in that building with nothing but artists. That was the moment that I chose to do this full time, because I couldn't do anything else. I'm like, okay, I've tried the corporate, I've tried the part-time and trying to work as an artist and this and this and that, but it just never worked. It never felt right. It never made me feel like I had enough time to spend as a mom, to be present. I knew I didn't want to be that parent that worked 3 jobs and never saw her kids. I never wanted to be that. If that's somebody else's story, you know, cool. But I knew that that wasn't going to be my story. And so being able to show up as this full-time artist, as somebody that makes that choice, you know, gives yourself permission, like we said, like authenticity is about giving yourself permission to show up in your fullness, to show up however you are that day, you know, to show up whether you got savings or not. I didn't have that privilege of having savings, you know, but to be able to show up and say, this is me, this is what I love, this is what drives me, and whatever comes from it, I'm gonna go with it. You know, I'm choosing that for myself, to choose that even when you have people that are like, that's not a real career, when you get a real job, what, do you make money off of that? Right.
It's exactly what they sound like.
Oh, they sound just like that.
Yeah, it's exactly what they
Yeah,
sound
that's my family, y'all. You're probably gonna hear that too, it's fine. But yeah, like just choosing that for yourself is like the biggest part of the process. I feel like just being authentic and showing up as an artist and saying, this is what I want, this is what I love, this is who I am, and not letting the circumstances control that. It's so easy to get caught up in that and to want the stability of what we've been conditioned to think of as stability. You know, that security. I would love to have that, absolutely. You know, but that just wasn't part of my journey. And I'm creating a different level or a different definition of stability, a different definition of all of these different things for myself that also informs my art. And so it's just this cycle of that, this cycle of authenticity. Just like you were saying, documenting. You know, I look at a lot of these photos and I'm like, oh dang, I remember exactly where I was during this time. The red balloon photo, or the one with the writing on it, that was while we were homeless. We were literally on the way to one of my friend's houses to sleep on his floor. And for me to capture that, you know, and people not even know, you know, but I can look at that and know where I was at that time. I can look back at that and say, okay, this is where I was. This is how I was feeling. This is what still brought me joy in that time. You know, this is me. Even through all that, I'm not my circumstances. I'm not what's happening. I'm not the conditions. That's me. To be able to do that is pretty dope.
Thank you for sharing.
Real quickly, I've just been very, very, very fortunate to have the best of both worlds. I've been able to do the work that I do and work at the same time, and really, truly, I'm fulfilled by both of them. Because I'm touching people, whether I have my camera or I'm doing assessments for people who are coming to my job. And I think I approach them both with the same passion, and work is not a burden to me. That's privilege, and I don't take that for granted at all. You know, I can leave work and come straight here. I have a wife that's you know, lets me do what I need to do, you know, and so no children, and I just count that as abundance, and I'm very, very grateful for that, you know. And when I hear stories like Jazz just shared, you know, sometimes I hear stories like that, go, oh, I'm not really, you know, I don't have that, and then I stop, I go, no. All these stories don't have to be exactly alike. You know what I'm saying? And all of these, the way we navigate our art and our passions, they're all different, but they're all of that same tapestry. It's a quilt, you know? And so when I hear those stories, I can just be honored by them. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to compete with them or compare them, but just go, wow, that is pretty damn awesome. You are awesome, you know what I mean? And so, yeah.
Stories. I think about how fortunate I am to have had a mother. She was born and raised in the projects. Grew up poor, but never really felt poor because there was so much love and support around her. When I create, I feel that I'm telling my story, but I'm also telling my mom's story. I'm telling my grandparents' story. I'm telling the story of the people who came before me. And the hardship that I'm facing as I get older is the death of loved ones. That has been something that's been very difficult for me to grapple with because I've seen these people for my whole life. I've loved them. We've gone through things. We hold each other accountable. And every time I see my mom, I see her a little bit older. And I know that one day she's gonna be gone. And so my art feels like freedom because she has lived her life. My grandma has lived their life. My dad has lived his life. And they have all intended for us to do better than them and for us to achieve our sense of freedom. And when I think about that and I get sad or I get low or I get panicky about, can I really do this? I'm so motivated and determined to make this sustainable. Not only for myself, but the older I get, I'm starting to think about the kids I want and the future I want for them. And I want them to also experience that freedom. But through each of the way that we create, the way that we connect with others, it's part of that tapestry that you were referring to. It's not just our story, it's the story of generations and all the people that came before us and the people here now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just such a great summary. And of course, all great, wonderful things eventually have to come to an end. But it has been such an endearing pleasure to get to speak with each of you. Would you please, so that we can all politely follow you on social media, what is your Instagram handle? Or whatever your go-to social shenanigans is.
Photobro1. PHOTOBRO1.
And I am the Jazz Johnson on Instagram, THEJAZZ. Johnson spelled like Johnson.
And I am Deanna_Bright on Instagram, DIONNA. Bright.
Everybody.
Yeah, there was 25 laughs, probably at least 16 genuine just sound effects.
We can't keep them all.
It's gotta be another list. Awesome. But yeah, this is wrapping up our talk at the Bobka Center. You can come and see Maxwell's and Wright's studios somewhere inside this building. I don't know where you're located.
In the basement.
You're in the basement?
Yeah. Lower level.
Maxwell's also
Cross
in
the tracks.
Jazz, do you have a studio?
If y'all give me a closet,
We'll
give me a little closet space.
There might be a closet space somewhere.
Cut off like that little spot right there. I can work over there.
No.
But no, manifesting a space
Oh, yeah.
very soon.
Excellent. Yeah. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you for
Thank you
moderating.
guys. Thank you.